Good morning. Happy Thursday. Is it the last day of work for most of you? The fancy coffee cup. So today I'm going to start to discuss with you what Tony Robbins calls the 6 human needs. And before we do that, 6 human needs is a way of explaining why people do what they do. And, there's a bunch of these different types of approaches. So like Myers-Briggs is a great one, which, talks about whether or not you're an SJ or you're this or you're that. My daughter has mastered that method of evaluating why people do what they do or classifying people. My wife now is, certified in yoga and Ayurvedic medicine. So there you talk about chakras. And so I hear all the time now that I'm a pitta, which means that I'm fiery, apparently. There's a Chinese method that talks about labeling people in terms of seasons. And there's another one that talks about whether or not you're wood or you're fire and I forget what those are called, but I think it's really, really helpful to find one of these filters, if not more than one, but at least one, and really master it so that you have a way of explaining to yourself why people are doing what they're doing. Because, remember, everything that everybody does, they do it for a reason. And it's always to avoid pain and gain pleasure, always. But the question is, what's pleasure? I mean, the same thing can be horrible for one person and incredibly pleasurable for another person. So if you learn these different systems, or at least one of these systems, when somebody's responding in a way that doesn't make sense to you, you can ask yourself, all right, well, why is this happening? And, there's a reason. There'll be a reason as to why they're engaged in this particular conduct. So like for a roller coaster, skydiving, let's say, that's a great example because there's some people will think skydiving is the greatest thing in the world. And for others, it would be the most terrifying thing in the world. So Tony Robbins talks about the 6 human needs. Yeah, don't you love my shirt? This was a gift. Remember, it's dark when I get dressed in the morning. So the 6 human needs, and we're going to spend the next couple of days talking about them. And, first of all, remember that these are needs. So when you talk about these other ideas, these are not things that people can change. You can change your approach to the world, but there's certain fundamental DNA structures that you have that don't change. So like, let's say that, they say that I'm a pitta in terms of my chakras. Now, I can change my relationship to that fundamental principle for me. So I can say, that what it means to be fiery can change, but I can't change the fact that I'm fiery. It's kind of like I can't change the fact that I'm 5'7". That's just the way that's just the way that I was wired. So we can change our relationship to those fundamental principles, but we can't change those fundamental principles. And once you learn how somebody operates, like one of the things I do with everybody I work with is I do the Myers-Briggs test with them, and then I have my daughter give me kind of a little bit of an outline with regards to each person. And then it's just really good to remember what are the drivers for this person and how do they need to look at things. Remember a long time ago we talked about visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Well, you can move in and out of all 3 of those, but there's one of those that you predominantly are, just like you're either right-handed or left-handed. And, if you're dealing with people on a regular basis, you need to know where they are in those categories because otherwise you're not communicating with them in a way that's most effective. If you know that they're visual, when you go to talk to them, you need to show them things. You need to show them charts. Otherwise, you're not going to get across to them as well as you could. So learn one of these techniques, because then you can really start to figure out, okay, here's why somebody does what they do. So the 6 human needs. The first human need, and remember, it's a need, so we fulfill these no matter what. It's just a question of, do we do it in a good way or a bad way? So the first human need is certainty. We all have the need to have a certain level of certainty. And for some people, this need is much higher than other people. So how do we get certainty? How do people do it? Well, we can do it by having a specific routine. We can do it by saying, every day I do this and I do this and I do this. And there's some people that want their life to be a routine. They want every day to be the same because they want that certainty. They want to be able to wake up in the morning and know that I go to work at this time, I have lunch at this time, I leave work at this time, I come home, I do this, and I come home, I do this. And that way they can feel like they have things under control. Certainty a lot of times is about control. People that are big on certainty try to control things. So achievers do this, right? Achievers try to control everything, and they try to control events. And when they can't control an event, then they blame something for why that happens, or they just get really upset when they can't control an event. They get stressed, which is an achiever's word for afraid. So we all need to have a certain level of certainty in our life, and everybody's level is a little bit different. The second human need, because these are all dichotomies, is variety. We have to have a certain level of newness in our life. So how do these things play? And you're going to find that the next, we'll talk about 2 more tomorrow and 2 more the day after, and you're going to find that they all are dichotomies like that. So how does that play out? Well, for some people, certainty is more important than variety. For others, variety is more important than certainty. Well, let's say that these 2 people get married, which these types of things happen all the time, because when you sit down with your significant other, do you sit down and do you go, hey, by the way, let's value your 6 human needs and see where you are and do them? No, you're all wrapped up in being all in love and the euphoria of all of that. And by the way, when we first get together and you first start dating somebody, do you do it in a visual way, an auditory way, or a kinesthetic way? You do all 3, right? You send them things, you send them gifts, you tell them how much you care about them, you show up all the time, you do extra things. When you're courting somebody, you do all of those things. And then what happens? Well, then the relationship starts to cool and turn into something permanent, and then we fall into a pattern of doing the things that we want. We show love in the way that we want to show love. We want to be shown love, which doesn't always work. So you might show love in a kinesthetic way by sending gifts, but that person may not want that. That person's way might be an auditory way. They may want to hear you say that you love them, or their way might be in a visual way. They might want you, the gifts can be visual, but a lot of times a visual is you have to look at them and tell them how you feel. They may want it in a kinesthetic way. They may want to be shown that they're loved by touching them, holding their hand, hugging them, physical contact. So again, these are all things to pay attention to, so that when you're communicating with other people and engaging in relationships with other people, you know what drives them and you know how to connect with them even better. So certainty and uncertainty. It's very easy to spot the people that their top human need is certainty, because you can watch them try to control things. And these needs can flow as life goes on. So, like a lot of times for somebody, if all of a sudden they acquire wealth, suddenly certainty becomes a huge need for them. Why? Because they start to get afraid. So all of a sudden they start worrying about safety. They start worrying about cameras, and they get a gun, and they worry about all these types of things. So is there a lot of certainty in the world right now? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The world is completely upside down for most people. So those people that value certainty, how are they doing right now? They're really struggling. And you can tell because they're freaking out. So, if you get too much certainty, what happens? You get bored. But if you get not enough certainty, if you get too much variety, what happens? You freak out. So, you may run into somebody, there's all kinds of videos of people freaking out in stores over masks, the whole Karen thing. There's one, the people are just throwing all their stuff. Well, why are they acting like that? Well, because the world's upside down and there's way too much variety and it's freaking them out. And so they're responding in these fashions like this. Okay? So know that everybody has 6 human needs. The first 4 that we're going to talk about, you fulfill no matter what. And I'll show you a chart of them tomorrow. But the first human need is certainty. We all have a need to have a certain level of certainty in our life at all times. But the second need, we all also have to have a certain level of variety. So, and we fulfill these needs in either a positive or a negative way. So if you're in a relationship and you value variety and the relationship is getting boring, what might you do? You might start a fight in the relationship simply because that'll create some variety in the relationship. People do things like this. If all of a sudden you see somebody do something and it doesn't make sense, then you can ask yourself, okay, what human need is important to them that's not getting fulfilled? Because chances are that's why they're reacting like this. So if today you see somebody react very emotionally for a reason that doesn't really make a lot of sense for what's going on between the two of you, it's not because of what's going on between the two of you. More likely than not, it's because there is too much variety in their world right now. Things are upside down. They're not sure what tomorrow is going to bring, and they're freaking out. And they just happen to be freaking out in this fashion in front of you. So as we go around the world and interact, ask yourself, if somebody's responding very bizarrely, ask yourself, why is this person doing this? Because they're doing it for a reason. And remember, it's always to avoid pain and gain pleasure. So what is it that they're trying to avoid? Right now, too much variety. So we'll finish the rest of these. We'll do 2 of them again tomorrow, and then we'll do 2 of them again on Saturday, unless I change my mind. But we'll get through with the 6 human needs. And I give you, take a look at something on PMBR. That is an amazing tool for figuring out what makes people tick and what motivates people. There's some other ones that are a little more simple, a little less complicated. PMBR is pretty complicated, if I'm saying that right. It's the Myers-Briggs. And if you need any training, my daughter, man, she has mastered that particular method of evaluating people and seeing why they do what they do. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have an awesome Thursday. Work towards your goals. We're all in this together. Let's take care of each other.